Now that is a daunting task. Adapting Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace, Vojna I Mir, into film. This behemoth of Russian literature is not only venerated in some country, but renowned worldwide as one of the most important compositions ever put to page. The challenge lies not only in War and Peace significance to the Russian people and to the world, but also in the sheer breadth of the book. It is over 1,200 pages long. It contains intricate descriptions of the inner workings of many characters' psyches and describes scenes of tremendous scale. How does one even begin to put to screen Pierre's lengthy inner monologues and complex feelings, or grandiose spectacles such as the Battle of Borodino or the burning of Moscow? You can't. That, however, hasn't stopped a few from trying. War and Peace is, after all, one of the quintessential works of literature, especially in its own Russia, where it has, ever since its first complete release in the 1860s, been a symbol of the people. The most prominent of Tolstoy's contemporaries praised him for his historical accuracy and his ability to capture the Russian spirit, and the novel retains favor and renown with both critics and audiences to this day. The most monumental attempt at putting Tolstoy's magnum opus to screen is the four-part, 7-hour Soviet epic War and Peace, which was released from 1965 to 1967. Not only is its length imposing, but so is the scope of the project. Most scenes were shot on their historical locations, and as many as 120,000 extras were used. The epic was directed by Sergei Bondarchuk, who is also responsible for another Napoleonic masterpiece, 1970's Waterloo, starring Rod Steiger. Bondarchuk's mastery of grandiose set pieces is as evident in War and Peace as it is in Waterloo. The film stars Viktor Tikhanov as Prince Andrei Balkonsky, Lyudmila Savyelyeva as Natasha Rostova, Bondarchuk himself as Pierre Besucha, Alek Tabakov as Nikolai Rostov, Antonina Shuranova as Princess Maria Balkonskaya, Borisachova as Mikhail Ilarionovich Kutuzov, and many more. At nearly 2.5 hours, the first part, Andrei Balkonsky, is the lengthiest of the four. Despite sharing the runtime of what most would consider a long feature film, the pace is too fast for its own good. It has to rush through so many plot points. Many characters are not introduced properly, or at all. And I suspect most people who haven't read the book would be lost as to what is actually happening at most points throughout the film. Frankly, this film is a mess. Despite Tolstoy's novel being also divided into four parts, the film does not follow the same structure. This initial part actually stretches into book 2 somewhat. The fact that a 147-minute film has to rush its way through a quarter of War and Peace only serves to illustrate how impossible the task of converting such a lengthy and intricate story into film is. To its credit, many of the film's individual scenes are faithful to the books in a vacuum. However, they are often shown without proper setup, or so little time is spent on them that it confuses the viewer more than anything. In fact, the viewer is often left wondering why the events are taking place. Without knowledge of the book, it is impossible to follow. Numerous scenes take place without having been introduced to the audience. Perhaps the most egregious lack of introduction, considering her prominence in Part 1, is Anna Mikhailovna Trubetskaya. She is never named, yet she is the mastermind behind legitimizing Pierre and his becoming Count Besukhov. She is why Prince Vasily and Pierre's other cousins are passed over by the will. She had been coming to the old Count for months, singing Pierre's praises and disparaging the old Count's legitimate heirs. The film barely attempts at showing any of this. She fetches Pierre from the party at the Rostovs to bring him home on the day of his father's death. She wrestles with a cousin and Prince Vasily for the will. This scene is particularly bewildering because we never find out why Anna Mikhailovna is playing tug-of-war with the cousins. We never find out that she is an impoverished noble that cannot even afford her son's army uniform. Speaking of her son, he only appears in one scene and is never linked with her. We don't know that she is relying on the goodwill of her connections to survive in Moscow. We don't know that she expects Pierre to be her and her son's benefactor in return for making him count. All of this is incredibly relevant to this first part of the story, and I cannot help but feel like the tale is incomplete without this information. Pierre's agreement to be Anna Mikhailovna and his cousin's benefactor is important to establish Pierre's submissive, good-natured character. Additionally, we never get a confirmation of Pierre being named heir to Count Kirill Bezuha. We see the tug-of-war over the will, people crying over the Count's death. Then, the next time we see Pierre, he is at Prince Vasily's getting coaxed into marrying the latter's daughter, Hélène. What happened in the meantime? Why is the prince so invested in the prospect of Pierre and Hélène marrying? Why is he so impatient? Well, Vasily's insistence on the marriage is supposed to be a confirmation that Pierre has just become one of the richest men in Russia. Would the non-book reader know this without needing an explanation? No, they wouldn't. Although the vast majority of the intended audience would have been familiar with the book, a film should not need the book as a crutch to explain its plot points. The uneducated viewer should be able to discern the key elements of the plot, while the book reader should marvel at finally seeing the literary work translated to a visual medium instead of trying to fill in the gaps from memory. Another problem with the book accuracy of individual scenes clashing with their disjointedness is that it leads to continuity errors, chief of which happens just before and during the Battle of Schöngraben, when Kutuzov finds out his army needs to urgently reposition itself to avoid being annihilated by Napoleon's main force. He dispatches 4,000 men, commanded by Prince Pyotr Bagration, in a seemingly doomed attempt to delay the French and to save the bulk of his army. As he prepares to leave Bagration, Prince Andrei asks Kutuzov permission to stay. He is denied, Kutuzov stating that he too needs good officers. The two ride off in Kutuzov's carriage. However, during the Battle of Schöngraben, we see Barakonski at Bagration's side. We also see him vouch for Captain Tushin after the battle. When did he leave Kutuzov's side? Did Kutuzov change his mind? Did Andrei disobey him? How did he get to Schöngraben if he didn't depart with Bagration? This is frankly puzzling, and I was left wondering whether it was truly Balkonsky in those scenes. Maybe it was a different character played by someone who looked remarkably similar to Tihanov. It was probably someone else, since they had shown Balkonsky being denied his request to accompany Bagration. Only upon rewatch that confirmed was Andrei. Pierre's character suffers the most from these time constraints. Mainly, his chance meeting with his mentor Yosef Alexeyevich Bazdiev is completely excised from the story. The man who Pierre revered so much and so hoped to emulate is conspicuous by his absence. Not only is Pierre's impetus to join the Freemasons gone, but so is his joining of the order altogether. In fact, without having read the book, one would not even know Pierre to be a Mason by the end of part 1. In a scene that does the two main characters harm, the new Count meets with Prince Andrei at Boguchareva, but it fails to have any kind of impact. Any non-book reader would be hard-pressed to figure out how this innocuous conversation between friends changed Andrei's whole outlook on life. Speaking of Prince Andrei, it is the first we see of him after the birth of his son. We do not know he took up the building of an estate at Boguchareva. The location isn't even mentioned by name. We have no idea where this conversation is taking place. From the film alone, one would think that the oak tree Andrei's carriage passes twice had a more profound impact on his character than his conversation with Pierre. Nor do we know how grim his perspective on life has been since the death of his wife. The film fails these two characters greatly. Another, albeit more minor, disservice is the one done to Fyodor Ivanovich Dolahov's character. Dolokhov plays a pivotal role in the stories of both Pierre and the Rostovs in the first half of War and Peace. Despite this, his role is largely reduced here in the film. After his introduction, in which he is shown as somewhat of a mischief maker, he reappears at the Battle of Schöngraben, where he makes certain to tell an officer of his valiant conduct. He had been demoted in rank for the Bear affair, and was eager to climb back up the ladder. After the war, at a party given to honor the heroes, he is seen taunting Pierre over his wife, whom Dolokhov is said to be having an affair with. Now, all those things happen as they do in the book. We're only missing one valuable piece up to this point. Dolokhov, Nikolai Rostov, and Vaska Denisov have been great friends since the war. In the book, it is this friendship which leads Dolokhov and Denisov to spend a great deal of time at the Rostovs. There, both fall in love and unsuccessfully propose, Denisov to Natasha and Dolokhov to Sonia. Whereas Denisov is a man of honor and good humor and simply ceases coming to the Rostovs, Dolokhov is not so grateful. He takes great offense at being rejected and decides to take revenge on the family. Dolokhov blames Nikolai most of all because of the latter's betrothal to Sonia. Nikolai, a poor gambler much like his father, is tricked by Dolokhov and loses a great deal of money. In fact, the young Rostov gambles away 43,000 rubles in one game of cards. This is an even more crushing blow for him because his family was already struggling financially. The Count had warned his son of the sad state of the family's affairs. None of these events are shown or mentioned in the film, by the way. The camaraderie, the two proposals, and the spurned lover turning on his closest friend are all absent. There isn't even any mention of the Rostovs' financial difficulties, while Dolokhov's unscrupulous and cruel behavior was already showcased in his mocking of Pierre. To turn on one's brothers in arms and closest of friends is a different story altogether. The chief weakness of this film is that not much time is given to anything. By trying to capture too much, it ends up giving its audience too little. It does not give most events time enough for them to be impactful or even be properly understood. It is a fatal flaw in most scenes. There are a few exceptions, however. The film gets off to a good start. The scene where Pierre and Andrei are discussing a party and the latter's departure to war is superbly done. We get a sense of the mutual affection between the two main characters. When Lise interrupts them, we truly get such a strong impression of Balkonsky's contempt for her and her bewilderment at her husband's newfound hostility. Another stellar scene featuring Balkonsky is his goodbye to his father. The complicated dynamic between the two is perfectly represented here. The strict father and the son molded in his image have difficulty expressing their feelings to one another. Despite the few words spoken, we get exactly what is going on. They both cannot bear the thought of the other dying, yet they must come to terms with it, as it is a very distinct possibility. There is an interesting dichotomy between them, however. As evident since the beginning of the picture, Prince Andrei cares not what others think of him and his decision to go to war. He does not entertain the old wives who come and ask him how he could abandon his pretty wife to the country to go fight a senseless war. Andrei doesn't care how his joining the army is perceived, at least by the other nobles. He simply needs an escape from his current life, which he regards with disdain. The old prince, on the other hand, is well wary of his image. It is the whole reason why he is living as a recluse in Bald Hills ever since his dismissal by Emperor Paul, Alexander's father and predecessor. He would not have his son, or as he says it, a son of Nikolai Balkonsky, be a mere aide de camp. His son should have a position befitting his royal title. This is the same concern about his own prestige that compels him to warn André against behaving in a cowardly manner, even though he knows well that his son will never dishonor him so. Such vanity is not shared by André. The dinner at the Rostovs is equally elegantly represented. The cheerfulness of the family is contagious. Natasha is superbly cast. She is the very picture of innocence, the perfect image of her literary counterpart. Everyone at the dinner is having a good time, even the family's oldest son, Nikolai, who is leaving his beloved to go vanquish the usurper Buonaparte, as they call him. He does not fear the fight to come. He relishes the opportunity to go fight for God, country, and Emperor Alexander. Perhaps no one at this dinner party exemplifies the naive gaiety of the pre-Napoleonic Wars Russian aristocracy better than the Count himself, Ilya Rostov. The Count is a bon vivant. He enjoys lavish dinners, good music, and dancing. Contrary to his guests, he laughs at the story of Pierre throwing a policeman tied to a bear into the river, showing a lack of seriousness. One could say he is the personification of the gay old times. This is further supported when the Count's dance and music is juxtaposed on the image of the Russian army marching into battle, an omen of things to come. The Russian nobility, thus the Rostovs, would be forever marked by things to come. Perhaps the film's biggest draws are the battle scenes. The film's grandeur is legendary among cinephiles, the sheer scale of the battle scenes being the primary reason. As many as 120,000 extras were used during the epic's production. The results are undeniable. Very few other films manage to capture such an authentic feel when it comes to large-scale set pieces. Seeing the armies marching towards each other during the Battle of Schöngraben is a wondrous sight. It fills the viewer with a terrible sense of dread. Not only does it serve the spectacle of the movie, but it also helps the narrative. The 4,000 soldiers in Bagration's force are said to be but a small fraction of Kutuzov's army. Yet 4,000 soldiers look so impressive when they are captured on camera in accurate numbers. It gives us a better sense of how important this battle is. The annihilation of an army more than 10 times the size of this one would truly be devastating for a country. It would signal the end of the war and could cause the ruin of a nation. What better way to portray the importance of such events than to portray them on an appropriate scale? If the film solely kept itself focused, it would be a masterpiece much like Bondarchuk's other Napoleonic epic, Waterloo. Alas, it is not, but it is nonetheless a remarkable cinematic achievement. In this first part, the only gripe I have with the casting is Pierre and Hélène. As far as stature goes, Bondarchuk looks exactly like his book counterpart. The only problem is his age. Same goes for Hélène. They both are portrayed by actors in their 40s, whereas Pierre is supposed to be a young man who has just finished his studies abroad. Hélène is supposed to be a desirable young princess whose father is the quinquagenarian Prince Vasily. It just doesn't fit. While the film is heavily handicapped by the utter size of its source material, the constant need to rush through plot points is salvaged by the brilliance of individual scenes and the incomparable spectacle. War and Peace truly is a captivating story. I can only wish that there were more. Wait, there is.